village. Now this is representative of the Monongahela type culture, an Iroquoian type culture. This village here particularly was located on the Susquehanna River, but it's the same type village that they found up near Pittsburgh and even into Ohio. So this culture would have been around at the same time that the Fort Ancient culture. Notice the dependence on corn here. We have a woman pounding corn. Earlier in the Fort Ancient tape, we showed you how one of these looked like. That's for pounding corn. Here we have a man watching over the crops, keeping the predators and the birds and things off the crops. This role was usually given to like an older male, or female sometimes did this. Also might have doubled as like a sentry. Once again, corn, the women's work. Corn is what brought about the great change in population densities and things like that during this time period. This would have been around the 1200s. Once again, you see now these villages here were heavily stockaded and fortified. So it's presumed that you can see there people manning the tops of those stockades. So these were defensive works here, as well as, territorial type markings. Whereas if you see some of the Fort Ancient, now they don't look quite this formidable, but I was talking to one archaeologist and said that they very well may have been a lot more built up, the walls of the Fort Ancient villages, than what they appear to be. We have an older man instructing a young child. Youth here learning how to hunt. They're already learning their skills. Pottery making. You can see them grooving the lines on the pottery, and this is, as I said earlier in the Fort Ancient tape, this is how they identify a lot of these potteries, a lot of these cultures, because they had their own distinct markings on the pottery. Now here is fishing, showing how they use the fish traps in their canoes. Now the Monongahela culture, there is evidence, they have found evidence that they were in conflict with a lot of other tribes, and especially like the Iroquois. When the Iroquois came in during like 1500s, when the fur trade was active, there was a lot of fighting over the furs, particularly in the northern areas where the furs were heavy, and there was competition between the Indian tribes to try to control the fur trade. Now the furs in the southern area were not that thick, so the competition between the furs in the southern part probably was not as ferocious as some of the competition in the northern areas was. And they have found graves where there's been in these cultures here, this Monongahela culture, well, the Iroquois, where there have been evidence of battles. Here we have the inner shaman ceremony. It's completely dark in here. You can hardly see what's going on, but they're doing a ritual dance. Here we see some of the temporary shelters. Now, a lot of times these groups would split during certain times of the year, and family units would go out and have their own established territories on the river, and then they would meet together at certain times, come back, and this is where the ceremonial complexes come in, where the scattered groups come back for their ceremonies. Their corn, especially when corn came in, green corn, and here you have a night sky celebration. And the night sky was very important to these people, as well as the sun. The sun became more predominant for the planting and things like that, and the energy. And then the evening sky was where you received your dreams and messages, and you could also use that for a calendar. Here we had an abandoned village showing how they would burn their villages when they left and move on to a new site. This is where the competition came in a lot of times, intertribal competition for resources, hunting, fishing rights, things like that.
Caribou hunting.
This is prehistoric. Seen here, caribou hunting. This would have been in the Archaic period, showing how they lived there. And here we have sunflowers. Now, growth of, this is how man first learned how, the American Indian especially learned how to domesticate plants. They would follow around like plants like sunflowers and things like that, just plant small amounts. And, you know, they practiced what they call horticulture as compared to agriculture. When corn came in, then agriculture became big. Now these are petroglyphs here. And this was a common American Indian way of communicating. You see the symbols, all those symbols would have meant something to them. They've been different clans, messages to each other, possible road maps, messages from the gods. You name it, it probably was on here. Territorial markings. See, in a birch bark canoe, the Indians became very adept at building these, particularly the northern tribes, and they used the dugout canoe as well. There's some kind of a message there. This could either be an Indian bragging about his hunting skills, or possibly wishing that the game would be more plentiful, or even some clan. Here you have, this is an actual petroglyph that there was a fish there that was pulled off one of the rocks. That's an actual one there. It was grooved in there. Here you see the winter hunt here. Winter was particularly a devastating time where a lot of tribes would scatter during the archaic periods because the population density was that high, and they could support it. Now here is definitely a Mississippian type. You see the influence of some of the Mississippian or even the southern, the cross there. Now, although this is a Monongahela type site, that cross there, representing the four corners of the earth, the four winds, whatever, was found at many sites. It's again fishing, and you can imagine the size of the salmon or trout that they pulled out of these rivers at one time, because the rivers were cooler. Burial here. The Monongahela people used different types of burials, just as the Fort Ancient did, and even the Hopewell, where depending on their status, you know, it would either have been like the higher status, sometimes cremation, or log tombs, or marble slabs, and for the less wealthy, sometimes they're just a simple bundle burial, and giving grave goods. There we see the weeping widow there in the background, grieving over the loss of her husband. He said he died of old age at like 36. Once again, pipe smoking was extremely important to the Monongahela people, and Fort Ancient as well. They found these a lot of these pipes have status attached to them. It would only have been allowed to smoke by certain clans or certain family members. Some would have been communal pipes, as opposed to some would have been individual. Once again, you see there's so many similarities in this culture, even though this tribe is maybe thousands of miles from other tribes using the same type pipes. So there was a lot of commerce and a lot of interaction. Now here's a comb. These are combs. Notice they probably would have been worn in the hair, as well as, you know, used for combing. They made them into decorations. Such a reliance on ritual and status. Everything had to had to have its place in the spirit world. Now here you have a dugout canoe. This was actually found laying in a bog, and it was preserved. There you see Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, 1250 AD. That's definitely from the Fort Ancient period. It just shows you how they burrowed out this canoe by firing it and then chipping away. Here we have Susquehannock pottery. Notice the similarity between this and some of the other types, the Monongahela type and the Fort Ancient type. It has a distinctive rims to them a lot. That's what marks them as belonging to a specific culture. Although the lines are not as fine sometimes what they may appear to be. But they also tell, because of the way the clay has been tempered, where the Fort Ancient start to use shell. Other tribes use limestone, things like that. That's how they figure out whose pottery it is. Although some of that even crossed over. Here, just once again, you see the burials. that when they were what they call flexed, where they have the now getting into some of the animals that would have dominated the area. See these birds here now. It's really important because a lot of times when you get to these archaeological sites, you don't realize what type of animals around here. The earth is alive. All these animals would have been known very well to these Indians and used in ceremonies. Their animal power. I was reading one book that said that the American Indian, there was the lines between animal and man, or they were all seen as all God's creatures. The lines were not that fine. Here we have the type of raptors that would have been around in the Monongahela culture. A lot of these birds also would have been present and would have been known in the Fort Ancient culture, because like I said, this was all during the same period. And there probably would have been some type of interaction between this. Once again, the white-tailed deer, this animal here is found in more abundance. The remains of this animal and Turkey were their primary source of food, and also a lot of fish and mussels. So they weren't hurting for food or anything. There was plenty. It's just amazing the type of birds and the species that were around now. A lot of these birds, you don't see them around anymore. Us today, we're not even aware that they were even around because they've been run off. Their habitats have been destroyed when they drain areas, wetlands primarily, for farming and things like that. That forces certain species to move out, or even some species to die. Now here you see the fresh type of trout and other fish that would have been in the rivers, in the Ohio River and Allegheny River, and some of the tributaries coming down into like the Hocking and some of the other ones. Although you see more and more of it, it is coming back today. Especially they're stocking, they're trying to keep the water cleaner, but there's still, from what you hear biologists say, there's still a long, long way to go. The reason I'm presenting these animals here is because you couldn't actually present a videotape on the American Indian without giving some respect for the life and the animals and their brothers that they had, these animals. I'm going to play a little tune here from a bone whistle. It only has 4 notes, so bear with me.
Welcome to the Winter Lodge. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No illness, disease not allowed in a house. Be well, be happy, be well. May my funny face make you well. Yeah. Yeah. Shh.